2, and here we are.
Welcome back to the Fireside chat.
On 86.5 The Vibe.
How you doing, party people?
It's your boy Jackie C.
And Shade.
And Shady V. Apparently we're trading roles today. You want to be Jackie C? I can be Shady V. It's like, nah. Hope you all been doing well. Shade, how have you been doing your gallon of water?
I'm doing okay.
Okay, I was gonna say I saw some posts today where I think it was Meg the Stallion showed off what 3 weeks of drinking for a gallon of water a day can do. I think it's on Twitter if y'all want to look it up. But I was like, yeah, I haven't been doing well recently, like hitting the gallon every day. I've been getting like 3/4 of a gallon. But I was like, I gotta start doing better. That being said, welcome back. We're glad to have you all. We'll start with some Black history. I think that's fair. So Shade today is going to talk to you all. As you all know, he is a professional musician. He's going to talk to you all about the history of African Americans when it comes to music.
Okay, sure. And so, even just to break that down just a little bit, because if we go over the entire history, I was going to say, if we talk about the entire history of African music and other forms of like African descent music, quite frankly, we're going to be here for hours and hours on end. Pretty much any form of modern day music that you know or understand, especially if you're American or some form of Westerner, so a European nation, anything like that, any form of music that you're probably familiar with in some way comes from African culture. And so here's how that really breaks down. A lot of it comes from their rhythm. And so even if we're not talking about tribal, if we're just talking about them in general, in Africa, a lot of the big instruments were either string-based, like the Egyptians, or percussion-based. And you see that riddled throughout the entirety of Africa. And essentially, they took these instruments to the different places that they traveled, whether it was in slavery, like in the cases of America, or if it were other things like the Egyptians and their trade. They took these instruments to all these different places, and that's where we get things like the guitar or the sitar. Even all those things come from Africa. But same thing with like bongos. Those are also in like cajones and all those things. These are all coming from African root instruments. So down to the instruments, Africa is the biggest root that we have for rhythmic and string-based music, which is the majority of things that we see. So if we're talking about violins, if we're talking about guitars, if we're talking about drums, if we're talking about any variety of those things, we're talking about Africa. That all comes from there. Now, we do have another side of music. We have Western music that's just purely Western music. That's more European. You're talking more about classical music at that point, composition. A lot of those instruments came from Africa, but a lot of the ideas for that came from more of a European time. And that stuff got brought over to America as well. And to touch on what you were saying, country, that's actually where we get that, is African blues. We get like the slave trade, all that stuff that created blues because they came over to America and they were given these now westernized instruments, which were basically westernized versions of the instruments that they were already familiar with. Their drums, they're now guitars, but they didn't have guitars before. They had their own version of these instruments that are now guitars. And so this was what they had. They were a people based around music, and they started creating. They created their own style, their own sound. And the Europeans that of course enslaved them heard that sound. They'd even play with them, they'd learn from them, and that entire sound grew. It grew into what was originally folk music. And this is very popular up into and even through the Civil War period of American history. That's like the big thing, is you see folk music all around, which is a combination of blues and classical. So classical coming from the Europe, and then blues coming from the African, you put those together, and then you add African rhythm behind that. That's where we get this folk. Eventually, that refined, especially as there was separation amongst the races. So definitely, like, I think, Jay, you can probably tell people slavery at first was one thing in America, but as it grew and developed, it shifted it into an entirely different monster where it kind of bred our racism. It didn't start from a place of racism per se. It certainly was about like classification and like seeing people as being beneath them, but it wasn't based on this hatred and depressing nature. It was more economic originally. Is that true?
Yeah, the first slaves arrived in America in 1619, and racism, or they were. Some people even argue that they were indentured servants, as a number of them received their freedom. And you look at like what the Atlantic Creoles went through, but it wasn't until 15, 20, 25 years later that like black codes and things started coming out about how you're going to treat your slaves and how Africans are to be treated in the country as a whole. And so, yeah, certainly.
Right. And so as that became more and more prevalent, especially as the South became more populated, because that's where this really started to take root, was in the heat, in places like Georgia and, all the crop towns, essentially. As that stuff started to develop, the Europeans, what we would now call white Americans, kind of had their own what do they call them, plantation homes, and they would live up in their almost luxury, versus the separation where they had the slave quarters. And in those places, that's really where blues started getting developed. Blues is the basis behind country. You take blues, add more blues into folk, and you get country music. And the same thing is true with rock music. Rock music is a combination of country and folk, blues, and then adding a little bit of other things in there. So you get the original R&B. So not the R&B that we're familiar with, like not R&B where you get turntables and interesting like seventh chord, some interesting chord sounds and stuff like that. Not that. This is like old school B.B. King, like blues calling, shouting R&B. This is the original stuff. And all that stuff came from there and created rock and roll as well. So all these things start branching into all these other different dimensions, and that creates things like metal, it creates pop, it creates rock, it creates every single form of Western music that we have for modern day. There's not a single thing. I mean, even like, let's say the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. The Trans-Siberian Orchestra uses like blues scales that come from blues to do their guitar solos, because blues is everywhere. You can't go anywhere without finding the blues. And if you're talking again about music, Western music in general, it's all African. It all comes from that blues. It all comes from that instrumentation. And quite frankly, it's one of the most amazing feats, I would say, in all of art. Really, it's just the impact that African society has had on music as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for that, Shade. That was very informative. I feel like the people watching got a lot from that. And I'm going to say that the bottom lines would you say that the bottom lines are, one, Western music is derived from African music?
Past a certain point. So originally, no, but up at a certain point, as nations kind of come together, as it's like past, let's say 1600, 1650, yes.
Okay. And then the second bottom line I would say is that when people say that like rock and roll or country, things like that are for white people, you would say that's just ignorant.
That is. And that's something that I've even been told as a rock guitarist myself growing up in usually what is a more accepting area. One time I was told, and it was quite shocking, by a person that I didn't really know, but they were affiliated with a friend of mine. And they told me, like, hey, like, black people don't play guitar. First of all, I'm mixed raced. Like, I have tons of stuff in me, black, Spanish, white, whatever. But also, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. One, we created the guitar. But two, like, come on, man. What are you gatekeeping this stuff for? So, yeah, no, definitely. I think that's important stuff to remember. I agree.
Yeah, so I think that those are the two bottom lines. That being said, for the fireside chat today, I guess we should have said this earlier. We had somebody ask us to change it up and to say everything we're going to go over in the beginning.
Different topics.
And
okay.
So for today's episode, we're going to talk about the accusations against T.I. We're going to talk about COVID relief, and we're going to talk about Trump's impeachment, whether or not that's constitutional. That's a question we got. And then we're also going to talk about promise rings for Virtual Dating Plus. Promise rings. Yep. You all should be excited and stay tuned. That being said, let's hop right into it. So, T.I. accusations. I don't know if you all are aware, Shade, if you're aware.
It's bad.
These are accusations, but when there's 30 women, you have to call it down the middle. You can't look at Trump and be like, oh, there's 30 women. He obviously assaults women. And then look at T.I. and be like, oh, well, T.I. is the king of swag. Da, da, da. Like, it doesn't.
King of swag.
It doesn't work that way. He's the king of the South, the swagoo of swag. I don't know. I had somebody say that to me, and I was like, I don't know if that's how that works. Like, I don't know if just because you're kind of cool, you can't assault people or engage in craziness. And just one little, excerpt we got. If
was it you that was telling me about that woman who was sleeping with basketball player, or no, she was forced to sleep with a basketball player in college, and she was told, like, what she was like assaulted, right? And she was told, like, well, I would never say no to that guy or something like that. Like,
yeah, I think it was at Duke, and it was the same woman who accused our current Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax of sexual assault. And it actually came out in the story when she was telling. It came out in the story. She was talking about Justin Fairfax, and she was talking about how he was a good friend of hers, and she was leaning on him when she had been assaulted the first time. And she talked about that some, and then she was saying, Justin Fairfax said the reason that I, assaulted you was because I knew you wouldn't tell anybody, just like you didn't tell anybody about the first guy. The first guy being a basketball player whose name escapes me right now. But yeah, that was all a part of those accusations, I believe. But yeah, it's one of those things, like I said, you have to call it down the middle. You can't sit there and jump up and down because you hate Trump. You're glad that, and I mean, these are in a lot of these situations, these are the same people who, like I said, dislike Trump. These are the same people who didn't want to see Brett Kavanaugh confirmed the Supreme Court over one allegation. One. And then they see T.I. has 30 that come out in under 24 hours. It's like, oh, T.I. is the king of swag. He's rich. He's got money. Like, of course he pulls. Like Donald Trump has a lot of money. Like, you don't think like Donald Trump, like growing up, like Ray Shremmen made a song called "Up Like Donald Trump." Like people like to sit here and be like yes, I'm not really gonna get into it, but just to read, one of the excerpts of what they're saying. This is just one of the 30 people who have come out. This actually isn't one of those 30 people. This is a bystander who co-signed on one of the 30 people. And this is what they said. They said in 2016, during CIAA, I'm not sure what that is, in Charlotte, I went to their suite at the Ritz, and they locked everyone's phones up. They passed around Molly and cocaine and said the only people who could stay had to take their pants off. I was so lucky because my homeboy Troy was there, part of Tip's entourage. And he pulled me into another room to smoke and told Tip, like, she good, meaning don't bother her. I watched him drag girls back and forth from the bedroom to the bathroom to the living room. One girl was crying because she wanted to leave, but they refused to give her her phone to call an Uber. At one point, he came out of the room and asked his security to come pick this B up off the bed because the girl was too messed up to even walk. They carried her from the bedroom to the bathroom and left her there. I snuck into the bathroom to make sure the girl was okay, and she was almost unconscious. I'm a nurse, so I checked her pulse, which was barely there, and she was sweating and shivering. I left that night 5 years ago, and it still haunts me to this day. I wonder what happened to those girls and if I could have done anything to stop it or help them. He is an absolute monster who uses money and power to manipulate people, and Tiny is his secret weapon. This is truly sickening.
That's awful. That's awful. Sad.
It's
And wow.
Yeah, it's
And so there are like 30 different allegations that are not the same, but similar, of similar nature, have similar topics, all saying kind of the same thing. Especially if like a lot about Tiny, if I'm not mistaken, as well.
Mm-hmm. They say that his wife is very complicit in it all. No, I think it's important to note, like I said, once again, that there's 30 allegations. And it would be one thing if it were, I understand, people want to side with who they know / what they know,
Mm-hmm.
like we know T.I., we don't know these women. But for me, I look at it as much deeper than that. I think to myself all the time when I look at the African American community, if you look up crime statistics right now, you'll find out that white people, white men, police officers, they don't kill African Americans anywhere near as much as we kill each other. And that's not even including, the selling of drugs and whatnot. And that leads me, and that's a common known fact that a lot of people use to attack the Black Lives Matter movement. But it is a fact, but I'm not going to use it to attack the Black Lives Matter movement at all. I'm going to use it to illustrate another argument for you. What if, just like, we all live in our communities, just like, white people kill white people more than black people kill white people. Black people kill black people more than white people kill black people. It's the same with all crime, whether you know that or not. That means that theft and even things like rape, black women are raped more by black males than they are by others. And I guess my point is, when it comes to T.I., a lot of you all, and myself included, we talked about protecting black women. It starts with standing up and making a change, not just in ourselves, but in our community. And I know, there's a lot of folks who still defend R. Kelly, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who defend T.I. But, one thing I noticed about both is I haven't seen a single white woman make an allegation.
Interesting, yeah.
Everything that they did was to black women, our own women, the women a lot of you claim you want to protect. Here's your chance. You can't stop. You can't bring Breonna Taylor back. You can't. If something like that were to happen again, guess what? It would have happened before you knew about it. You can't prevent it. What you can do when it comes to protecting black women and empowering them is it starts with believing them when they say something. When 30 of them come out, you sit there and tell me you believe the two of them over 30 people, I'd tell you that you're foolish. I would tell you you're foolish. Honestly, I'd say that you're probably a hypocrite. You probably sat there, like I said, don't confirm Brett Kavanaugh. Donald Trump is this and that. He's a, rapist. He's a sexual deviant, blah, blah, blah. And then you see things like R. Kelly and T.I., and you want to look the other way. And
Cut of the same cloth, man.
Yeah, no, for me, myself, and I, it's entirely unacceptable.
Nope.
I would look at them, I would say that T.I. is more like Donald Trump than he is like you. He has money and power. And those things do strange things to people. And so at the end of the day, I did say, that this show would always try and do our best to call it down the middle. The middle is these are just allegations. The tough matter of facts are there's 30 of them. And if you know how to do simple math, Shade, I think we've been over this before, right? Let's just be friendly. Less than 10%, we're going to go with 10%. Less than 10% of allegations are false. There's 30 of them.
That's like
do the math if you can.
It's like a 300% chance that it's probably true.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. For real.
Well, I was going to go the reverse route and say, what are the odds he's innocent? And you got to take,
negative
10. And I was going to say it's like 0.0000.
Oh, yeah.
But of course, I was going to say, of course, like I said, so I see a bunch of people online defending him, a bunch of African Americans, a bunch of African American males, I should say. And like I say, it really makes me sad because we'll be the first people talking about, defend Black women, empower Black women, and yet we don't even have the decency to believe them. Unless, of course, it's somebody white did something to them, and then it's rah, rah, let's go fight. No, the tough matter of facts are, I deleted T.I. off my Spotify.
I don't blame you. I was
actually R. Kelly too.
Do we have to stop listening to T.I.? Because that might be the move.
Yeah, well, like I said, so for me personally, like I said, I'm not going to tell you all to stop listening to T.I.
R. Kelly on my Spotify.
I'm not going to tell you all to stop listening to T.I. or whatever, but I am going to tell you that this is what I'm actually going to tell you. When it comes to things like that, the first thing that you can do is, like I said, not just believe them and empower them and whatnot, but, focus on their healing. Focus on being there for them, offering them support. So you don't necessarily have to delete T.I. off your Spotify, but you shouldn't be on Twitter making, quite frankly, a fool of yourself.
Yeah.
And a lot of you have made fools of yourself. I hate to call it, so I'll call it right down the middle. And those are the tough matter of facts. If you sit here and you want to tell me that Donald Trump is, this and that, and you have nothing to say about T.I., who had 30 allegations in 24 hours. Donald Trump racked up 33 in his entire lifetime. So let's be clear, T.I., this thing could continue to shoot up in a way that's almost unbelievable. And like I said, so if y'all want to protect Black women, the first step is making a change, not just in yourself when it comes to how you address things like this, but it comes to making a change and with how we interact with them and how we interact with each other and holding each other as Black males to a higher standard.
Right. And we're not trying to come down on y'all. If y'all did go out, maybe you did say some stuff, or you're still kind of confused on the situation.
Oh, I am.
Read up on it. Because the thing that we're getting at as your virtual roommates is we just don't want you to look foolish.
No, I'm coming down on you. You look like a big hypocrite. You look incredibly foolish. And you, quite frankly, I know we're supposed to keep it clean on the show. You made an ass of yourself. No, 30 allegations in 24 hours, and you think he's innocent? Go on and touch the back of your neck. That's just, like I said, that's just absolute foolishness. So once again, these are all accusations. Half of them could be false. But the tough matter of facts are.
That means half of them still
I was gonna say some of them have to be true. As a matter of fact, like I said, when you look at actual statistics on sexual assault, you would know that, like I said, well over 90% of allegations are true. And like I said, if you had one or two, I could see how you could sit there and, do what you're gonna do. But 30,
I'm sure people attack celebrities all the time for this kind of stuff. But 30
is, like I said, 30 is ridiculous.
30, it sounds like you're running like a ring.
Nobody else. Well, you heard what they said. So my point is, I want you all to do some homework. I want you to go out and make a list of celebrities who have been accused of sexual assault and see the number. And then when you see T.I. with 30 and Donald Trump with 30 something and nobody else with any, like I said, but the
30
the biggest thing for
30
me,
is
the
30
biggest
too many.
yeah, I was gonna say no.
Fair.
The biggest thing for me isn't about it's not about Ti. It is about supporting these women because, like I said, to go on Twitter and to see folks disregarding your story and uplifting Ti in this moment, like it's like that's not what needs to happen. Like at best, if you want to support Ti, at best you should argue for the privacy of those women and the privacy of Ti and his family until litigation can be till litigation can occur. Of course, in these situations, litigation is likely to never occur because what evidence do they have other than a bunch of people's words? There's no physical evidence or no physical evidence anymore. And so, but that's if you want to be pro Ti or whatever, that's how you go about it. But don't sit here and be like, Ti is the king of swag. He'd never have to do anything like this. Like,
if you want to be pro Ti, you should get a scientific calculator. That's really hard.
there you go. That's a good one. All right. So COVID relief. The Democrats have made an interesting decision. I don't know if it's one you'll agree with, Shay, but they've decided that they're going to run over Republicans. They've decided that Republicans won't get in the car. And so you don't want to get in the car, you can get ran over. It's unfortunate. Republicans they're going to pass COVID relief without Republican help. So remember how I told you they can do through a process called reconciliation, they can pass anything in the Senate with a simple majority. You can already pass anything in the House through a simple majority. So they've decided that while they're not going to get rid of the filibuster or run Republicans over entirely, they've decided that they are, for the time being, going to run Republicans over.
Why haven't they done this before?
Oh, people do it all the time.
Oh, they do? Oh.
Yeah, I was going to say, but it's one of those things where it's tricky because, and I'm going to say the same thing about Joe Biden that I did about Donald Trump. When Donald Trump came in, he said that he was going to be this deal maker. That didn't happen. Joe Biden said he was going to put the country together. That's not happening. I've been paying attention to some conservative news outlets recently, and
it's hard to put the country together, man. People don't want to be together.
Well, I think part of the problem is when it comes to Republicans, I think one, a lot of Democrats are upset that they're not going to vote to impeach Trump, especially after Dan Crenshaw, who's a Republican, came out and talked about how scared all the Republicans were when the riots were happening, how terrified they were and crying and whatnot and doing all kinds of stuff. Like, for them to sit there and be like, well, it wasn't really Trump's fault, despite the fact that I can't remember one of the Republicans said, call Trump and tell him to call this off. Like, tell them to stop. Like, I don't know that I blame Trump as much I don't blame Trump's speech before the riot so much for what happened as I do.
I blame more the group of people that decided to do it.
I blame them. I blame misinformation, which is a huge thing. QAnon. I blame I kind of to some extent blame freedom of speech. I mean, anybody in this country can say any damn thing and it doesn't have to be true. And that's really a problem.
You just can't lie under oath, I guess is all it is.
You can't lie under oath, and if you're a news media
advertise
outlet, you can't do libel or slander. Yeah. But you can say things like, if you're the election was stolen, you're not targeting any person that you're lying about, and thus
that's stupid.
Perfectly legal. So it's perfectly legal to tell whatever lies you feel like. And so to some extent, I blame, like I said, the echo chamber that has been the super far right that has been occurring since before Donald Trump was in office. You could argue it started with birtherism under Obama. You could argue it started in 2010 with the Tea Party. But, like I said, when it comes to COVID relief, so Democrats have made the decision to run Republicans over. I think that that's part of it. And then I think the other part is Republicans aren't serious about working with Democrats either. To sit there and say you have a $600 billion COVID relief bill, And Democrats ran. Remember when they were running in Georgia and they said, if we win in Georgia, we'll pass a big COVID relief thing. And then guess what? They won in Georgia. And now you know what you want them to do? You want them to not pass the COVID relief thing as if they didn't win in Georgia. That's silly. So Republicans, I don't know. If it were me, I would personally maybe try to stop running them over after this first month. I'd be like, hey, come on. But as far as COVID relief goes, like, everybody agreed. If Democrats win Georgia, that was the big campaign thing. Hey, if we win in Georgia, we're going to bring you COVID relief, da, da, da. For Republicans, for them then to get there, and then Republicans to be like, yeah, well, we were thinking you could just scale it back, you know. How about another Republican relief bill for them? That is not what people in Georgia voted for. That is exactly not what they voted for. Like, and so I don't know. Like I said, it's really tricky because, in my opinion, if you're a Democrat at this point, like, if you run them over, you should make sure you kill them. Like, I would make DC a state. I'd make Puerto Rico a state. I would say,
would do it.
No, taxation. I would say taxation without representation. I'd say make those two a state. I would start with, like I said, I would come up with some secure way that people could maybe vote online, like you log in on your government, whatever. I would make it so that maybe voting isn't just one day, it's a whole week. I would make it so that, like I said, like in a particular state, every registered voter with a address, you know, they get a ballot sent to their home. And like I said, there's a bunch of ways that Democrats, you can make it illegal, or you can make it so that felons can vote. Like I said, there's a bunch of ways that Democrats could really, really stick it to Republicans. So, like, I guess my point is if you're gonna run them over, make sure you kill them.
Yeah.
Like, don't leave them alive. Don't, run them over. I would
Finish
be doing
the job. Like, you gotta.
I would do, like, they start out with this impeachment vote, and that's going to be a tough vote for Republicans, especially since in the Senate, I'm not going to lie to you, the defense of Donald Trump, the truth for me is, and my defense is, I don't think Donald Trump should be convicted of it in the Senate. I think he should be convicted in a court of law. He is no longer the president. He can go to jail. If he incited an insurrection, that's a felony. That's not we're going to impeach you and you can't run for office anymore. That's you're going to jail if you're a normal person.
Yeah.
So if I incite an insurrection tomorrow, why I would go to jail if I told you all to burn down Wall Street because of all the BS they pulled in the last week, and you would go to jail if you said something crazy, but Donald Trump isn't going to go to jail. That just strikes me as foolish. So for me, I would, like I said, for the impeachment, and we're kind of getting into the next topic just a little bit, but for me, like I said, I personally would let it go to I would let the courts handle it. But the overall point is I would be putting Republicans through all kinds of votes. Like Marjorie Taylor Greene, that crazy woman. Now, she's in the news right now, and she is a crazy woman. She's in the news right now because I guess she went up to a Parkland survivor or a Parkland parent of a Parkland kid who got killed. And she was like, oh, where's your actor? Something like, she said they were all actors. Republicans, or I shouldn't say Republicans, I should say some on the right say that these shootings are inside jobs and they're actors and they're really
not people on the right. That's just conspiracy theorists.
Well, it's right-wing conspiracies. I don't think anybody on the left or anybody with half a brain, as a matter of fact, or better yet, two halves of their brain,
they're just
truly looked at Parkland or any of this stuff and they were like, it must be fake. Like Virginia Tech, like Columbine, that's all fake. Those are inside jobs.
Average Dale Gribble.
Yeah, this is from King of the Hill. I was going to say, no, it's absolute foolishness. And so for me, I would have like votes on her. But I think if I were a Democrat, I wouldn't try to expel her. I would have a censure vote. Because expelling her is like you're trying to deny like the people in her district voted for her. And hopefully they don't vote for her again. But there's really no telling. But I would be all about censoring people. I'd be like, hey, do you agree that this is wrong? Like, are you going to stand up and do the right thing? And like I said, that's just one of the ways. There's a million different ways. My point is, if you run the Republicans over, please make sure you kill them. Please make sure Mitch McConnell is never back in the majority. You have Democrats are in a very strong position going into 2022, but it'll be botched if you focus on Donald Trump too much, one, and two, if you spend too much time trying to compromise with Republicans. Because like I said, I saw that $600 billion relief bill, and like I said, I laughed. Like, that is like everybody went, Democrats won Georgia. Think about what you thought in regards to COVID relief. And imagine getting another check for 400. Like, after Democrats said they were going to get you 2,000. They're only going to get you 1,600 this time. But it looks like they're going to get it for you. They're going to run Republicans over. So, I don't know.
So just to touch on that next topic super quick, specifically the constitutionality of Trump's impeachment, I think is what you were starting to get at there. And so just so I can say my two cents, just because I think
go ahead,
have
for
a
sure.
legitimate, like, concise understanding of this, but there is no legislation on impeaching someone who's not currently the president. There is no constitutionality for it. There is no debate. There's no way to actually talk about that, because that's not really the correct question. Is it constitutional or not to impeach the president? It's neither constitutional nor not constitutional. But should we do it? I think it's a waste of time. I think it's a giant waste of time. Should we, like you were saying, convict him in a court of law for criminal offenses? If he's committed crimes, absolutely.
Yeah, like I said, I believe he has. And I think, like Mitch McConnell, I think most Americans would say, yeah, he was definitely tripping.
Exactly.
I think that his freedom of speech, I don't know.
So why is sedition not protected under freedom of speech?
Because like insurrection, like violent language isn't protected.
Violent language isn't protected under.
Like, if you send somebody a death threat, like, that's not freedom of the speech anymore. That's
really?
Yeah.
I guess it's assault. Send a death threat, like, I guess it's assault, right?
No, it's I'm not sure exactly what it would be. But yeah, I was gonna say that is not that type of language, stuff like that.
Verbal assault.
Inciting an erection. It could be. I was gonna say I'm not sure what it is. I just know it's illegal as all get out. I learned that I was in pre-law at George Mason. I learned not all freedom of speech.
Right, you're not allowed to, like, say fire in a movie theater either if there's no fire, or like you can't call a bomb threat on a building. Obviously that's obvious. Like, you should not call a bomb threat on a building.
Yeah, so
but it's also it's not protected, right? Like,
so yeah, like if I said, like, guys, like, let's go tear Wall Street down,
or I guess,
which I really do want to say on here,
you're not allowed to call the police for things that are not real emergencies, are you?
Yeah. No. So you're definitely right. Every constitutional question is a question with no answer until the Supreme Court gives us an answer.
Right.
So right now, there ain't no telling, because the first impeachment, the Senate voted not to convict Andrew Johnson, right? The second impeachment was Nixon. Nixon resigned. And then remember, so this is what I'm telling you all. Remember how Nixon resigned? The House and the Senate dropped the charges because they said there was no reason for them anymore. An important distinction there is he couldn't run again for office like Trump can. Trump can run again.
He couldn't run for office?
Nixon couldn't run again because he had already won 2 terms.
Oh.
So this happened in his second term.
Okay.
So he already couldn't run again. So they decided there was no point. As opposed to, like, now you could argue, well, there's a point of not letting him back in office. At the same time, like I said, when I'm telling you all, like, Trump needs to go to jail, Nixon had to be pardoned by Ford, or Nixon was going to jail, like in handcuffs.
Felon become president of the United States?
That's an excellent question. The way this country is unforgiving, I
doubt it, right? I don't think so.
Probably not, no. So that would be. I mean, anything is possible, but so me personally, I don't think that the Constitution, like the process of impeachment, is the process of removing a president from office.
Right.
The idea of them being, not able to run again, that's an added stipulation that you can put in there.
That's a stipulation to the conviction.
But that's not.
From office.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but that's not like, oh yeah, we voted to convict him, even though he's out of office and he can't run again now. It's like we kicked him out of office and now he can't run again. And so for me, in the third trial, Bill Clinton, he got acquitted. So there's no, like I said, no history on this. But so for me, like I said, the process is for removing a president. And so it would be unconstitutional. That's just me. Some people would argue that he has the title Mr. President for the rest of his life and receives those benefits. Just a title. And so, yeah, that's true too. Like I said, I'm just giving you the other arguments. No, but the real other argument, this comes from my Republican insider. He said that in his humble opinion, the key is whether the act of impeachment by the House occurs while a person is still in office. And in this case, that's what happened. I don't believe the founders would have set up a system where you could murder someone the day before you leave office and there's no way to stop you from running for office again. Now, to be fair, if you did murder someone, you'd be in jail. So that's how the founders probably prevented that from happening.
Right. You're not allowed to be a criminal.
Yeah.
Like you're not allowed to do that.
So he had a couple good points, but I really like that one because he's definitely right in that regard. The House,
so would you say that impeachment is basically a way to charge someone in the highest office with a crime? Is that like basically the point?
Yeah, when the House impeaches someone, they say whether or not you
to impeach them, you just convict them.
Yeah, well, I would say that impeachment is the House's way of saying you committed a crime, and then the Senate decides whether that crime warrants you being removed from office.
Right. Right. So it really should only apply while you're president of the United States.
Well, I mean,
because after that point, impeachment doesn't mean anything. You can't be removed from an office that you don't hold.
Well, I certainly, like I said, I certainly agree with you. I certainly agree with you for sure. But that being said, he had another thing that he sent me. He was actually talking about the 14th Amendment. I'm going to let you all in on a secret. This guy doesn't like Trump. My Republican insider does not seem to be a fan of Trump at all.
Anti-Trump Republican.
Well, I mean, to be fair, like Trump is
destroying. There's a lot of those now.
Well, I mean, Trump is destroying if Trump were to run again in 2024, we talked about this before. If he were to win, he would probably win the Republican nomination. Is anybody listening right now believe that Trump will win the presidential election again? No. He ran, number one, he did after everything that happened before that caused him to lose. And then you look at the stuff that happened after, you couple that with the fact that he was running against sleepy Joe Biden, who isn't even that great of a candidate, and Kamala Harris, who is also not that great of a candidate. And the fact that he couldn't do away with them, it's like, yeah, he proved exactly what everybody said.
When it comes foolish, like,
I mean, it just comes down to a lot of things, not understanding how to, attack properly. Like in the case of Kamala Harris, like you're calling her a nasty woman, blah, blah, blah. What you need to do is you need to be talking about how many black people she's locked up. The African-American vote literally won you Georgia. How many African-Americans do you think would have gone out there if at the last second they started having thoughts about how Kamala Harris, when she was in power, spent all her time locking African-Americans up and arguing against their release? Keyword, arguing against them. That's the other part. Like
that was the problem with him not being a politician. Is he
know
how to approach?
You know what else? You could also attack feminists. Joe Biden has a sexual assault allegation. As a matter of fact, Kamala Harris, Tara Reid made a sexual assault allegation against. And you know what? Kamala Harris came out and said, "I believe him." and then she decided to be his vice president. She's fake as a $3 bill. And like I said, like you could have taken her and dragged her all the way through the mud. And Joe Biden, like I said, he's sleepy. Like he is. Like Joe, there is nothing exciting about Joe Biden. If you listen to Pete Buttigieg, you listen to Beto Arms O'Rourke, like those people are exciting. Or even like if you listen to Kirsten Gillibrand, like she is a tough feminist. Or if you listen to Elizabeth Warren sounds like she's your college professor talking to you. Bernie is the father of a revolution. Like you have all these exciting people and then just sleepy Joe Biden.
You don't feel like it's
barely awake Joe Biden. Like
you don't feel like it's like listening to Scatman John, sleepy Joe.
I don't even know who that was, but that last part
he has a stutter. He's like a guy that did music based off of stutter. It's really dumb.
No, so I don't think he wants him to run again. So this is another thing he sent me. So Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. So a lot of you all know the 14th Amendment as it made African American citizens one. The second thing it did was it granted everybody the right to personal autonomy, right? So the right to do with oneself what they want. That's the same argument. The 14th Amendment was the one used to justify bans on abortion being unconstitutional. The 14th Amendment is what was cited in Roe v. Wade. And so, but the third section states that no member shall hold any office who have previously taken an oath shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States or given aid to enemies thereof.
Well, that sounds really.
It's arguing that, it's arguing that through a simple majority, Congress would have the power to ban. Now, like I told him, I wouldn't advise Democrats do that at all. But through a simple majority, ban Trump from running for office. I'd let him run. Say run like you're in the Olympics, big dog. Run, Forrest, run. Like,
do you think that people who have engaged in treason against the United States should be able to run for office? It's a really good question.
No, because we've all agreed our system allows for revolution. It's called a peaceful revolution. It's like the same glorious revolution that occurred in England, where people step down from power and new people come in. Think about, I think it's the John Adams was our second president, right?
Was he the second president?
Yeah, he was a one-termer, right?
I don't know.
Well, he was a one-termer, and then you know what happened? His party lost to the Jefferson's party. And you know what happened?
Jefferson? But Thomas Jefferson was a mean dude.
Hey, it is what it is. So his party lost to Thomas Jefferson's party, and they say, hey, do what you got to do, big dog. Best of luck to you. So my point is if you want revolution, get more votes. Whether you want a right-wing revolution, get more votes. You want a left-wing Bernie Sanders-like revolution, get yourself more votes.
Yeah.
This country allows for revolution, just peaceful. And so, yeah, if you're engaging in insurrection and the overthrow, not of the sitting government, that's the trick. A lot of people think it's the government, and you're talking about Joe Biden, you're talking about Donald Trump. We're talking about the system now. We're talking about you're trying to overthrow the Constitution. And so the answer to that question is absolutely not. If you have no reverence for the institutions that govern this country, then you have no business trying to control them at that point.
Agreed.
You haven't seen, think about it.
Agreed.
No matter how frustrated Bernie Sanders or AOC get, and they have every reason to be frustrated. Bernie Sanders got screwed twice. Well, the second time he kind of did it to himself. I was going to say, but it got screwed twice. And if they're not, Bernie Sanders is telling his supporters, hey, go get them. And as a matter of fact, when one of his supporters,
in the potential of what the American system represents.
Absolutely. And I was explaining to my kids today, we were talking about the Constitution. I asked them, why do you think that this is a perfect document? And they were like, they were sitting there thinking, and then someone said, someone asked me if it was a trick question. It's considered a living document. It's considered a glorious document. There's like 5 or 6 different words for it. But I asked them, and they were like, somebody had the idea that it might be a trick question. I was like, no, it is a perfect document. It's a perfectly imperfect document. We had a document. No, we had a document. No. We had the Constitution defined African slaves as 3/5 of a person. that same Constitution was amended not just to make them free, but to make them citizens and give them the right to vote, all in one foul swoop.
Right.
That same Constitution was amended to allow women the right to vote. That Constitution was amended to allow folks not, or to prohibit drinking, then to allow folks to drink again. That Constitution was amended at first. Senators were elected by the people. Your state senators were chosen by your governor.
I forgot about that.
And they were chosen by like the legislature, the other people you elected. The Senate didn't represent you.
The Virginia House of Burgesses?
No, that's earlier.
That's earlier.
That's something, yeah, I was going to say. No,
because I could swear there was someone who made... Okay, well, continue.
This is something different. But our senators, like, you wouldn't even be able to pick your senators to this day. It's a more perfect union. We just keep coming up with stuff.
That's where that phrase comes from, a more perfect union. It's not just words, people.
Yeah, and so, like I said, if you have no reverence for it, then hey, you've got absolutely no business at all running it. And so that's my opinion for Trump. That's my opinion for anybody on the right or the left or the center that want to overthrow the government. Like, you want to overthrow it, you belong in jail. Because let's be clear, while a lot of us have issues with the way our government is in our country, the tough matter of facts are if you get rid of things like the Constitution and the government, you have no sense of order anymore. Whoever comes into power now has perfect power, and it's whatever idea that they decide they want to perpetuate is what you will live with.
It's dangerous.
So if they're like in the case of Donald Trump, far right, like who knows what you'll see. Far left, who knows what who truly knows what you will see. But the tough matter of facts are you will definitely see violence. It'll definitely be dangerous, without a doubt. And so you're, like I said, when you incite an insurrection, you're threatening the safety of people, and I just can't go for that. So that's just me. I'm all for, like Bernie Sanders is talking about all the time, a political revolution, a peaceful revolution.
Nothing wrong with that.
It's never a, hey guys, go take your guns and go down. As a matter of fact, when someone did take their gun and they went down to D.C. and they shot Steve Scalise, Bernie Sanders was the first person to condemn his own supporter.
He came out with the steel chair.
Yeah, Bernie.
Have you seen that meme?
Yeah,
that's so funny.
He's like, Bernie Sanders with the chair. Like, yeah, no. So whether Trump's impeachment is constitutional or not, I would say the world will never know because he's going to be acquitted again this time. Yeah. And going forward, I believe that both parties, I believe that whoever the president is will always be acquitted. When Republicans had the chance to get Andrew Johnson,
do something truly intentionally wrong as the president that no one would allow you to ever do because there's too many checks that it would never happen. I don't think for you to actually be allowed to do something that would get you truly, fully convicted and impeached.
Well, Nixon did, but he had the presence of mind to resign.
He left. Yeah.
Like I was gonna say, like. It's funny to have a documentary and they're talking about they set him down, the Republicans in Congress. They're like, it's over, Mr. President. He was like, well, what can we do? They're like, no, you understand, sir, it's over. He was like, well, if we do that, they're like, no, sir. And they sat there for like 5-10 minutes with him coming with a bunch of crazy ideas and them looking at each other, looking at him being like, no, big dog. The nation is in an uproar. You're leaving office on your own 2 feet or you can be dragged out of this mug. But those are your only 2 options. And so Nixon did some stuff, I think, that he could have been gone. He should have been 86 for.
But he probably I think to some extent, to aliens. So
I think that to some extent, George W. Bush, with the whole Iraq war thing, like, I just, like, to some extent, I think he could have and should have gotten it. Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. Now we might not ever leave Iraq. Like, ISIS is there now. Like, it's a total safe haven for terrorism. So I'd argue the 2 of them. I would argue that Obama, when his drone hit a Doctors Without Borders hospital, if the American people were truly like a humanitarian people, they would have been like, all right, big dog,
can't do that.
I don't know, but that's the thing. I don't know that you would have gotten a conviction amongst Democrats. And then I would say that the last one, and once again, this would be a tricky one. It'd be interesting to see. It would be Reagan. Reagan had Iran-Contras. You know what that is? It's so you know how Iran is our greatest weapon today, right? Let every Republican tell you Iran is the filth of the world and they need to be destroyed, right? So we made a law that we weren't going to give money or weapons to Iran or something crazy. No, we made the law was we weren't going to give money to, we weren't going to fund any like illegal war in Nicaragua. So in Nicaragua, you had a war with the Sandinistas versus the Contras. You had the far right versus the far left. In other words, it was, the continuation of, containment. And so Reagan had this genius idea that if he sold weapons to Iran, he could then give the money to the I can't remember if it's the Sandinistas or the Contras. But the point is Congress had directly made that illegal. And he broke the law, like right in front of Congress's face, spat in their face. And so to some extent, like he probably wouldn't have because of political realities. The political reality is even after doing all that, Reagan was super popular. Reagan is still loved to this day. And I was going to say, Reagan's still loved this day. And as a matter of fact, Reagan's vice president, H.W., was able to win office after that happened. And so personally, like I said, I don't think he would have, but there's several instances. But I think the number one instance is Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson, it was a trap that they set up for him where he fired Secretary of War Stanton, and they had made it illegal to fire a member of the cabinet without congressional approval. Because remember, the Senate has to confirm them to go in. So they said, background information, guys. Andrew Johnson is Lincoln's vice president. Lincoln, to unite the country, and this is kind of, going back on Joe Biden uniting the country. If he really wanted to, he would have chose Mitt Romney as his vice president, a Republican, and then reached out. But Lincoln, and you have to look at your predecessors. Lincoln chose Andrew Johnson, a Democrat. Lincoln's a Republican, as you all know. And all the Democrats, everybody, they secede. And so he has this Democrat. And everybody in Congress is a Republican. And when Lincoln dies, you have a Democrat president with a Republican cabinet, right? Lincoln's a Republican, the Congress. And they were like, oh, we got to protect our people up there. So they made it illegal for him to fire them. And he was like, I don't say anything in the Constitution about that. Forget y'all. Y'all just made some stuff up and fired Stanton anyway. And they said, well, you broke the law, big dog. And so they impeached him. And then they were one vote short of convicting him. And he definitely broke the law that they had just written. And of the opposite party. And they still couldn't convict him. So as far as I'm concerned, impeachment is more of a little slap on the wrist, to tell you to don't do it again, And to be fair, Andrew Johnson didn't do it again. And you know what's crazy is the number of times the Republicans, Andrew Johnson's had more vetoes overridden than any president in U.S. history, probably than most of them combined. They overrode remember, it takes 2/3 to convict, it takes 2/3 to override a veto. They did whatever they wanted to him. They did whatever they wanted to the country. And then the last second, they're like, just leave you around. We don't really have to get rid of you. There's no real rhyme or reason. I mean, you're just there. He was just there. I mean, to be fair, they were in the wrong. The law that they had passed was unconstitutional. And I don't like Andrew Johnson. I think Andrew Johnson's terrible. I think he's a terrible person. Tough matter of facts are that law was unconstitutional.
Is it still in place law?
No, it got struck down. It's literally unconstitutional. The Supreme Court weighed in. It's not a constitutional question anymore. They told us, and we know, you serve at the pleasure of the president. They say that all the time. That phrase isn't just a catchphrase, it's the truth. You serve at the pleasure of the president. And so personally, I don't think that if that was the law today, I think Jeff Sessions would still be Attorney General. I don't think you would have gotten enough votes in the Senate to get rid of him.
That's a good point.
As I say, he was liked. I think Trump's secretary of, as a matter of fact, Trump would have all of his original cabinet members. His Secretary of Defense, Mad Dog Mattis, would still be there, although Mad Dog left on, all these people technically left on their own. But yeah, I was gonna say I don't think his Secretary of State, Rex, whatever his name was, all these people
So what do these people do after they leave, like the White House?
most of them just talk trash about him because he sucks. But I mean, like, you might write a book, you might do whatever. I mean, what do you do when you're retired? Like,
Oh, they just retire?
well, I mean, think about it, to get to that level in life, like Secretary of Defense Mattis had served in, the Marine Corps for 30-something odd years.
That's fair, yeah.
You're a general, then you become Secretary of Defense. Like, do you want me to do you want him to go back to shooting people? Or like Rex Tillerson was he was the CEO of ExxonMobil, left ExxonMobil to become Secretary of State. He's Secretary of State, the top diplomat in the country. It's like, what do you want me to do now? You're exactly right. What do you do now? Absolutely nothing. You go do whatever you want to do, and whatever you're feeling. That being said, should we take a short break?
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna take a short break. We will be right back with Virtual Dating Plus. We're gonna talk to you all about promise rings, and why you probably, as an adult, should stay away from it.
And then later on, we'll hit you with the rundown.
The real rundown. We actually have a real rundown today.
It's not
might
even
be
a
too
fast
fast.
break.
All right, we'll see you all in just a second. Looking forward to seeing you all.